Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Doug Bennett. I'm on the Higher Education Advisory Council, helping produce this event today. We're glad you're here with us the very last time slot of the day. We are here with Dan Powell and Rebekah Dorn from Florida State University. They're going to talk to us about change management. And if you have any questions for them, feel free to post that in the Q&A chat window, and we'll be able to feed them these questions afterwards or during, but don't hesitate to ask any questions should you have any. Dan, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us last time of the day. I hope you all have a lot of sugar in you. All right, so I'm Dan Powell, Florida State University. I lead our community engagement technology team, which is all things CRM and engagement. Our principal platform is Salesforce. You can see what our footprint looks like right here. And I am joined today with my colleague, Rebekah.
Good afternoon. My name is Rebekah Dorn, and I serve as the Director of Change Leadership and Planning. And my team has the opportunity to play along with Dan and his team on a variety of different projects that are based out of his engagement technologies team. So today we're going to talk a little bit about organizational change management, and we are using the analogy of parenting, at least to get us started, because so many times when we are starting a project, it feels like we don't really know what we're doing. So parents in the room, you can appreciate that sometimes we got to figure out what we're doing, figure out what are our first steps, how do we get things moving, who are these crazy creatures that we're working with. Sometimes we're going to have to pacify them and make sure that they're fed and cared for. We got to talk to them sometimes and use important tools like we're going to share with you today. And ultimately, how do we make sure that they're sustaining success? So at the very beginning, what is this OCM exactly? So organizational change management is the application of a structured process and set of tools for leading the people side of change to achieve the desired outcome. Other people define it as enabling the change within the organization, but in general, it's always worrying about the people side of change. We have a really talented technical team who are working on the ins and the outs of making sure that we don't break anything when we roll out a new enhancement, or that as we roll out a new project, it's working functionally and successfully. And it's really our team's job to look at the people side of change, to look at making sure our stakeholders are engaged, that we've communicated with them thoroughly in a variety of different ways, that there's training throughout it, and that ultimately we have the outcomes that we all want to get to, and that we know what those outcomes would be. So when we do change, we have a current state, and then we have an intentional transition, right? So one of the keywords here is that we're really intentional with our transition. And then we get to a futured state of what we want it to be. If all of that goes as planned, like the brochure of parenting that it is, then we have success, right? But sometimes whenever we have our current state and we trim off a few of the rough edges of that intentional transition, maybe we're like, we won't worry about really training them. They'll figure it out. It's really intuitive, I bet. Or if we think, we don't really need to send out another email, we've already done it, then our future gets a little off kilter. It's not so cut and dry anymore. It's looking a little wonky, if you will. And ultimately, our success is only halfway there, or 3/4 of the way there. So we really have to round out those intentional transitions so that our future straightens up a bit, and ultimately we have better success.
Right. So where do you get started? When I first came on board here at Florida State University, we were underway with 2 enterprise-wide initiatives, and we had one other project going, really high-profile project for one of our colleges. Work with an implementation partner had already begun, and so I was in a situation I needed to get my hands around all of this mid-flight. I read the statement of work, and I started looking for the project artifacts, which we didn't have any. There was no charter, no project plan. We didn't have documentation around our users. Just that, hey, we're replacing a couple of systems and we're putting in this new one. I said, all right. So I started to ask questions. I asked, all right, how do how do we know who to communicate to and when? Who does the training? Who does the rollout? And so, we started talking, and the answer I got back was essentially, well, hey, we have this implementation partner. They gave us this project plan. We're following this project plan. It ends with deploy and thrive. It sounds great. So, after all, they're doing it because deploy and thrive. So we started rewinding that conversation, and then, recognized that, hey, deploy and thrive meant, hey, we're handing this back to you to go and roll out to your users. So we started to build our project artifacts and our implementation plan, and I got our change management team involved so we could start to figure out, it's like, okay, what are we doing? Who do we need to be communicating to? The project was in flight, but we were early, so it wasn't as catastrophic as the wall we were about to drive through. So what are your first steps? So, it's like you're driving change, and driving change means that, you're moving people from doing something one way into something totally different. And that takes leadership buy-in, and it takes shared understanding and support throughout. If you put yourself in a position, when you start a project, you want to put yourself into a position to answer two key questions. So the first one is, did we do what we agreed together that we would do? And you want that to always be yes. Now, the second question is, does what we agreed to do still achieve the benefit that we thought it would? Nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody really understands what it is they're asking for, where it is you're going. So the answer to that question can be maybe, kind of, no. But you want to put yourself in a position where at least you agree to do something. You get on that shared understanding so that you can start to build that partnership. And you do that with the traditional project artifacts. So a product charter with scope, assumptions, goals, KPIs. And then you hand those artifacts over to your change management professionals. And they can look at it and they can start to figure out, it's like, okay, here it is. This is what we're trying to get done. And they can figure out how and when to resource your effort. So this will set you up for a strong partnership with leadership. It'll set you up with a strong partnership with your delivery teams, and it'll put you on a path for success. Which answers, sets you up for your users.
So I always like Dilbert, and he thinks that change is good as long as it's happening to someone else, right? We can all agree, oh, change is good. Change needs to happen. Innovation happens when we change, but don't make me do it. And so one of the first things that we would recommend is that you get to know your users and that you respond in a way that your users need you to respond. Many times I've tried to put together the exact same game plan for one project as the next project. And so what we would highly recommend is that you get to know your unique users for that particular project. Even if you think, oh, these are the same users that I always have. I always have freshman students that come in. Well, today's freshmen are very different than tomorrow's freshmen. And so making sure that you understand what those students need or what those faculty and staff need or alumni need will lead you to much better success.
So you want to start answering the questions like, all right, who's impacted? How are they impacted? So, there's ways to find those people and pull out what you need. You need to start building empathy so you can meet your users where they are. You want to start to find ways to group your users together. And I'm going to share a few different ways of doing that. But when you group them together, you start to figure out, it's like, okay, if this is this group, I can start building communication plans that are targeted for that specific group. There's many different ways to do this. I'm going to start you off with one that's a nice conceptual exercise to think through. We're going to start with the consumer adoption curve. You probably know a consumer adoption curve, but so you can put your users into these 5 different segments. So you've got your innovators and your early adopters. These are the people that take on or want the newest technologies because they're into it. They're not told necessarily what it is. They're going to figure it out and they're going to tell you what it's all about. The next group is your early majority, and they get energized behind what the early adopters are doing with something. And then you have your late majority, and finally your laggards. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was teaching a group of IT analysts about this same thing, and I had each of them lay their phone on the desk. a few of them had the latest, greatest iPhone. And then we hit that bell-shaped curve. And then inevitably, one of my IT colleagues laid out her BlackBerry. Now, I'm sure she's a bit disappointed now. But, if you rewind a couple of years, if you think about the statistic, as of 2019, it's a little bit older stat, smartphone adoption in the United States hit 80%. So there's 20% of people out there that don't have smartphones, and that's a huge number of laggards. So, and some of those laggards might actually be your users on a project. So this is a nice starting exercise. But what makes it relevant is when you overlay the Gartner hype cycle. So I'm pretty certain all of you know the Gartner hype cycle, but briefly, when a technology hits the market, it gets a lot of attention from all of the users, including late adopters. And when when it's in this hype part of its cycle, people think they know what the technology is about, but their expectations may be more wrong than right. And as the tech follows the curve, what we can expect from it becomes more known, and people have an easier time of understanding it, an easier time of adopting, because they can identify with how it's going to help them and what they're going to do. So conceptually, let's say that you lay these two curves over each other, and that the technology that you're trying to roll out is just after the peak of inflated expectations. The distance between that technology and which segment you put your user population in is a strong indicator as to how much change management effort that you're going to need to plan for. So that's a nice conceptual way of getting things done. You might not really be able to do it entirely, but there's other ways of grouping people together. And what you're really trying to do is you're trying to start to build your stakeholder analysis. And the stakeholder analysis is going to help your change management professionals plan for how to reach all these different people. So you can use personas, which my team uses personas religiously. It helps you. There's different ways that you can group different people together, behavioral identifiers and demographics, and you can kind of build these different profiles. There's other ways you can graph people. You can graph them into their interest in solving a problem versus their interest in driving success, which I didn't show here. Or you can group them like organizationally with their organizational influence on one axis and their interest in solving a problem on their other axis. So that groups them into 4 different people, and it gives you a nice way to think about how you want to interact with each one of them. And that's going to set you up for your stakeholder engagement. And so, I was leading this high-profile project, and this one was a university-wide rollout of Marketing Cloud. And we had to find some pilot groups, and we had over 150 different groups that we could choose from. It was really big effort. We were talking amongst our IT colleagues and our senior leaders, and some of our senior leaders were adamant that we lean on our IT groups, the groups that were led by our IT professionals, to be in our pilot, because IT is our best friend, so roll out to them first. We agreed, but we also looked at the data, and we leaned on input from others and who we thought were our real innovators. And we added two groups that were non-IT led to the pilot. So we had 4 groups. Once we got started, we really helped our non-IT groups because, these were non-IT people. They were the ones that, we really needed to focus on, and our T folks were going to be just fine. And we weren't all that worried about them. And what actually transpired was we had 2 groups really take off and be successful, and the other 2 groups become a political nightmare that we actually had to unwind, take them out of the pilot, and we ended up onboarding, at least one of them was the absolute last group that we onboarded. And those 2 that we onboarded last were our best friends in IT.
So it's important to remember that resistance to change is a natural reaction. None of us are really excited about change. And so we have to bring them along with us. Bring your users, bring your stakeholders along with you whenever you are going to bring about a change. Create an elevator pitch that is specific to that project and to the variety of users that you have. Tell them why. Why are we changing? Why is this a good thing for them personally? If your answer is that it's going to save the university money, that's legit and an important reason, but don't include that in your elevator pitch. No one wants to hear that the reason why they have to go through a whole lot of change, a whole lot of trouble, is to save the university a few dollars. So you need to come up with what's the why, what's in it for them that actually makes them excited. Include those key partners into your planning meetings and give them updates regularly. Sometimes the best idea is to include your biggest naysayer in on those planning meetings. Let them know a little bit more of the minutia of why things have to happen. And we'd also really recommend that you give everybody a small but necessary job. Nobody needs another job, another part-time job, in addition to what they do full-time, but they need to feel like they're included and they're important, that they have some stake into the success of this project. When you're able to say to them that at the very end, and you need someone to give and to reach back, you need someone to be able to ask for help. This can't just land only in your lap. And whenever you bring more people in, then it's the combined success or the combined failure if you're in it together. And the other thing is that you always want to provide a repository of information, either if it's a public process that you can put on a website, or if you feel like this is a private matter that can't be made public, put it inside something that's authenticated, some type of portal, so that you can have a central place that you point all the information back to. One of the most common complaints that we get is that people feel like they were left out, that they don't know what's happening, and that all these decisions were made without them, and that they feel like they were not communicated with. When the reality is that you know what I know. There's no secret here. You just don't know it yet because there's nowhere for you to qualify that. So provide all the most up-to-date information to a point. You don't want to give every single meeting minute notice, but you could provide general updates of where we are and what the timeline looks like. We always create a RACI, and maybe you use this at your home universities as well, but a RACI provides a matrix that really provides who is responsible for this particular task, who's accountable, and then who needs to be consulted or informed in these things. If at the end of the day, a sub-project team is saying, well, I didn't know anything about that, you can look back at your RACI matrix and say, okay, we didn't know we needed to inform you. Or you're right, we should have included you. We should have informed you, or we should have held you accountable or responsible. This sets out from the very, very beginning, who's responsible, who needs to be updated, and then no questions asked later about how you can move forward. Now, I'd like to pretend that if you follow these easy steps, that it's easy as pie and that there's no problem, but let's be real. There's always problem children. I think you can probably think of a problem child right now in your head. I know I can think of a couple right now. So what do you do with these problem children who are causing you some trouble during the middle of your very important and amazing change that you're bringing forth? Well, one, you need to be really clear with your plan. Even if you don't know exactly how it's going to be working, say that. We're still trying to figure that out. That is a gap that we have not yet figured out, but this is what we do know. Follow back up with that confidence of saying, you know what we know, and we're going to bring you along with us. When possible, seek their opinion as early as possible. So you could do this through surveys or focus groups or individual one-on-one conversations. Sometimes the solution for problem children is that you boomerang it back to them. What do you think? That's a great question. I haven't thought yet of a solution. Do you have a recommendation on something we can do? This does two things. One, it provides a chance for you to hear their idea and for them to feel empowered and engaged, and maybe they do have an amazing idea. And the other option is that it really shows them that there isn't a solution quite yet. This isn't an easy checkbox answer, and that we have to work through this together. When you need to, be ready to enforce those process agreements. What was in that original agreement? What was in the project charter that we would do? Who is the sponsor? Who gets to make these choices? And at some point, you may need to go back to that and say, this is how we're going to handle these situations. And I'm sorry, this is the best that we can do. And then other times you really have to either deal with it or defer. Sometimes you are not the best person to carry that message, and that's okay. Find someone who has the political relationships that they can defer, that you can defer to them, and they can have the conversation on your behalf. This isn't a place where you have to always be the solution. rely on your team, rely on those relationships. As they say, relationships is currency. And so really try and lean in to where can you ask people to help you. So the other thing that I mentioned early on is a website. So a website is something that is helpful that you can always have a public, keep pushing people back to. On this website, you can have a timeline of how things are going, where we are in the timeline. It's important to keep that timeline updated. And you can provide a variety of resources on this website. It is important that you have something for various different learners. So whether this is an auditory learner or a visual learner, or someone who just wants to find the answer themselves through frequently asked questions or self-help. And you can push all that information here and keep reinforcing on each of your communication methods. Check out our website. There's more information on our website so that people constantly know that there is more information. There is support for you if you head this way. The other thing that I would recommend is that you prep your service desk with some language that they can refer to whenever an angry caller comes on. Now, I know it's hard to believe, but the service desk sometimes gets calls from people who are very cranky about whatever the change may be. And so it's important to make sure that we're having them use the same language, using the same communication methods of pointing them back to the website or hearing their concerns and hearing and processing those any way that they can, but that we feel like one team solving the same message. So I wanted to share an idea about communications. And sometimes we think, well, I sent them an email. I don't know what else I could have done. Check. And they didn't read it. Well, I don't know about you, but I get hundreds of emails a day and I can only read a few lines of each one before I start to get distracted by something else, my cell phone, my Instagram. Something is always getting my attention. And so emails are really tough to be the main source of our communication. But when we talk to people and we ask, how do you want to be communicated with? They always tell us email, right? So I wanted to tell you guys about this project that happened on our campus a couple of weeks ago, right when we came back from the holiday break. And it was that they had spent months with this new project on campus. And as they rolled it out, they said, we're pleased to launch this new system. It's coming next week. Here's the information. Here's the training you can go to if you would like to go to it. And it's going to be great. We got an email the day that it goes live that looks something like this. That was very nondescript, and it used different language than what was in the prior advancing email. And it felt like spam. Well, what's ironic about it is that we have for months and years trying to teach our staff to not click on links that look like spam. And our campus responded. Our campus thought, this looks like it is from somebody else. This cannot be real. And so no one wanted to complete the task that was required of them. The project team was so frustrated. They were like, we emailed them. We told them what was going to happen. And then we send the email like we said we were going to, and everybody freaks out and thinks it's spam. Well, in the end, they have to send out another email to say that email that you received this morning was legitimate and not spam. Please complete the task that we requested you to do. But because it looked so different and it didn't have all the information that the previous email had, it didn't feel like it was the same thing. And so people didn't trust a single email.
Right. So you really want to try and control the conversation. So that project, it actually didn't have a communication plan. They thought basically what they were going to try and do, but they didn't think through the branding part of it and all the other different pieces that you need to, especially to reach the thousands of staff. Now, we've talked about meeting a user where they are. We've talked about identifying your influencers and planning for your problem child. And we know that we don't all read email, and we know that email is still king, with something like 2.5 billion emails sent globally every second. There's other channels that we can lean on, and you can use these different channels to meet your users where they are. You want your users to start buzzing about the upcoming change, and you want them to use your words. And keep in mind, if you don't say anything at all, you're still communicating. Only at that point, the user gets to decide what is being said, right or wrong. And you have to figure out ways to reach each of your different personas. So you've got an opportunity, especially if you're using Marketing Cloud, then you can lean on that and set up an omni-channel communication plan. You can lean on Journey Builder to help you through this. Now, there's when you come into the messaging part of it, and there's different types of messages, different things you can say. Quick call out, if you got to pick up on the appreciative inquiry session earlier today, I talked a lot about messaging and positive messaging. There's different ways to communicate to your different audiences, and there's strategies behind each.
So on every project that we roll out, we come up with a very comprehensive marketing plan. And this is everything from the emails that we're going to send to the print pieces that we're going to have to the partners that we're going to give presentations to. For example, one project we have coming up to roll out to integrate our into a single tenant for our Office 365 to students has 85 different ways we're going to communicate to students. Now, you may think, whoa, 85 different ways, but it's the same message in different forms coming to different people. And that way we're making sure that we are reaching the online user who is never going to step on campus and see a print piece. We're going to see that average Joe student who's going to walk through the Landis screen on campus and see a poster, but would never read an email because he's going to delete it as soon as he sees that it's from us. And so really trying to look for different ways. This even includes making sure that our advisors on campus are using the same language, or that our campus partners and our faculty members feel prepared to answer the students' questions if they ask. We like to use a rule of 7 times 7 different ways. And so it's the 7 by 7 rule. And it's the idea that people need to hear a message 7 times in 7 different methods before it finally sinks in. There's so much busyness, so much clutter happening in our world today that we really have to have things reinforced multiple times before we hear it. But the trick is also kiss it, and that means keep it short, stupid. And so how can you say what you need to say as quickly as possible before you lose their attention? Another tool that you can really use that's super popular in the change management world is the AdCAR method. And AdCAR, it starts with each one of the letters: awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcements. And it's the idea that in awareness, you are saying over and over and over again, that 7 times, 7 ways, over and over again, how can you make sure that people are as aware as possible of what the message is that you're trying to send? Desire. You're helping to connect with people. What's in it for me? Why do I want to do this change? What makes me want to participate and learn more? So you really have to connect in and understand what's going to drive those advisors versus those students, versus the freshman student, versus the subpopulation of the online part-time learner. Then from there, you have to go to the knowledge. Do they know how to do the change? Is there any training you need to provide them? Is there any one-step guides that you could do where you could list, or one-page guides where you could list out the steps? Or is there a video they could watch? Or is there a training they can take? The ability comes in whenever it talks about, do people have the skills that they need to learn the new system? Do they feel like they could actually put their hands on it and do it again tomorrow? That's one thing to teach people, but it's a different thing for the learner to actually be able to perform the task by themselves. And so ability is really giving them the chance to be able to have the tools necessary to move and actually perform the task. And then finally, we want to come back with that reinforcement, celebrate the successes of those that have figured it out and have gotten on board with the change, and then also reinforce what did we not do well, and go back and make sure that we train again on those things. So I would highly recommend that you keep AdCAR handy. I can tell you it worked for us when we recently did our Salesforce Service Center implementation on the Service Cloud. And so what the MyFSU Service Center did is that we were able to kind of walk through all these steps, have weekly tips leading up to it, do this, check this out. And it was just bite-sized nuggets of things that people could do to start to get ready for the change. Things they could do way in advance. So they were starting to hear from us regularly before we pulled the carpet out from them and said, you're using this new system. We had Zoom trainings in small targeted groups. Who are these users? They had something like commonly together. And so they were able to share ideas together or collaborate on different projects. We gave them a sandbox where they could go in and play and try and make sure they knew what they were going to do in a situation where they couldn't break anything. We challenged them. Try to break it. It's fine if you do. That's what we wanted you to figure out how to do it now before you get it into an environment where it does matter. We encouraged office hours. So we said, you try it on your own, and we'll be here during these set times. Come visit us. We'll answer any questions you want. So instead of telling the adult learner they have to be here at this time from this block, we tried a few different methods by saying, come to training if you want, or watch the training on these videos, play in the sandbox, and then come ask us questions or give us feedback. And then ultimately, we followed up each one of these trainings with different surveys and focus groups to find out what landed and what didn't. What could we do better, and how could we make sure that we do a better job this next time? So sustaining success. You roll it out the door, you think, okay, I'm done. And I like this graph a lot because I'm not quite sure where you fall on this graph, but a junior designer thinks that when we understand the problem, that's really easy. The hardest part of our job is designing the solution, and then we're done, right? We ship the solution and we turn around and say, what do you have next for me? But as we mature into this career, we understand that the problem of understanding the problem is challenging. To really get your hands around what are we trying to solve. And then designing it is a little tougher, but it doesn't really get difficult until we let other people see it. Because we all know that once we get things out the door, we still have to start iterating over and over and over again until we are able to solve the holistic problem versus just the one that we identified at the beginning. And so it's really thinking of this as a process versus a one and done.
Right. So that senior designer has enough experience to know how easy it is to take a customer for granted or at their word, like I did in that pilot example that I gave just a little bit ago. And they know that projects get increasingly harder, especially after launch. From a change planning perspective, and really from a project team perspective, be okay being wrong. Just pivot around it. Allow yourself to iterate. Remember, you're trying to answer two key questions. The first one is, did we do what we agreed to do? And hopefully that was yes. And then the second one is, does what we agreed to do still yield the expected benefit? And again, that can be maybe, kind of, no. But that's okay, where it's okay to be wrong. That's the partnership that you've built. It's the partnership that you've established. Now you can iterate around it and grow from there and make your solution a stronger solution. Another key thing to consider is that enterprise rollouts, really all projects, have an exponential number of voices. So you have to keep influencing the conversation. You've got to be able to sustain that positive momentum. When people talk amongst themselves, you need them to echo and reinforce what you want them to say. Engagement doesn't end with the launch of a project. In a lot of ways, that's where it kicks in. And from a change perspective, you also need to plan for post-go live support, outreach, office hours, and schedule regular check-ins with your clients. Okay, so do we really think we're in control? Gnarls Barkley? No, we don't. We know we're crazy. Resistance to change is a natural reaction. Here's 10 takeaways from our presentation today. I hope it was helpful. Please reach out to Rebekah or myself if you want any of our templates, or if you just want to talk through, whatever your situation might be. We are absolutely happy to jump on a call. Looking at these 10 things, Rebekah, if our listeners were to remember just one of these, what do you think they should take home?
For me personally, I think the biggest takeaway is to meet the users where they're at and make sure that you are planning the change for those users, not for yourself, because we may know the technology, but we don't know how they're actually going to use our new impressive enhancement. So that's mine. What about you, Dan?
Right. So, I couldn't agree more. The other piece of that for me, out of my own learning, is plan for change early. It doesn't matter if you don't have a team like thankfully I have with Rebekah, or if you need to assign somebody on your project team. Just make sure you assign somebody on your project team and add that in, even if it stretches out your schedule some. It'll help you drive adoption. And it's never too late to add afterwards. So remember, you are moving somebody's cheese. And with that, thank you for your time today. Doug, back to you.
Well done. Well done. I even enjoyed that more the second time around. So good job, Dan and Rebekah. So we're going to take a minute to let them catch their breath and see if anybody has any questions. You can, I really don't care where you put the question. You can put it in the chat window or the Q&A window. I'll check both, and I'll be sure to read out.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can switch back to seeing the chat. All right.
We have 33 of us here, so surely somebody's got a question. Debbie wanted to say hi to you, Dan. All right. Last chance. If you don't have any questions, we are going to be ending this event today at a Higher Ed Dreamin' Celebration coming up at 4:45. So feel free to join us there and collaborate with some of the organizers of this event and other presenters. So thank you for attending. Dan and Rebekah, thank you very much. This was really, really informative. And we hope to see you present again sometime soon.
Well, we did just get a question from Tatiana, but we're happy to answer, Doug, if that's okay.
There we go.
I'll let Rebekah jump in on it, though.
So, sure. So our question is, any suggestions on how to get people excited about the change being forced from the top? Absolutely. So I feel like most of the change that people have to endure is coming from somebody that it wasn't their idea, right? And so you really have to drive with what could they get excited about? So, for example, our student 0365 implementation that we're working on right now, there's tons of benefits for our faculty and our staff members, and there's just a ton of benefits for people except for the students, and the students are our biggest people that are impacted. And so we had to go and use our student interns and say, what can we tell people? Why would they be excited about this? You can collaborate with faculty members. And so the faculty members are more excited about that, and the staff members are. But we really had to go and ask those users specifically, like, what would get you excited? And the students were able to give us some valid feedback and some ways to phrase things that would say, that's worth it. I can now do that. And I'll let you in on a little secret. Probably isn't the best thing to admit out loud, but our students said that they can sign up for new services with a new email address for free. And that was something that they could do more short-term signups because pilot signups because they would have a new email address. And so while that's probably not going to be first on our marketing campaign, that helps us inform a way to talk to the students. So you really have to help figure out what's in it for them, with them.
Right.
It's a great question. All the time, that one.
All right. Thank you for that question, Tatiana. Any other questions from you or anybody else?
Joanna, what's in it for them, with them?
Don't know what that means, but
Yes.
what's in it for me? Got it.
Sorry. What's in it for me?
Great.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.